Good morning, church. How's everyone doing? Good. Awesome. Got 3 people awake this morning. That is great. Hopefully I don't, if I see you sleeping, I'll shout you out. Just kidding. I can't see a lot of you, I promise. I can only see some of you. Well, it's good to be here this morning. I'm so glad to be able to share the Word of God. We're talking about contact points and just different times in the Bible where Jesus had contact with someone and how they left feeling better after that, where their lives were completely changed. Well, today we're going to talk about someone specific. If you have your Bibles, we're going to start out in the book of Matthew, chapter 26. The book of Matthew, chapter 26. Has anyone in here ever felt like they've let someone down before? Anyone ever felt that before? Anyone ever felt maybe you had like a project with your job or maybe a project at school or something and you just felt let down, or maybe you let someone down, right? Where it's a group project and you kind of forgot to do your part, right? Or maybe you're at work and there was this big company presentation and you were going to be doing great and all of a sudden you forgot to save the document or it disappeared. Well, there was I had a moment like that in college, actually. So anyone play intramural sports in college? I would say I played, oh yeah, Pastor Ryan. We might have played against each other. I don't remember anyone wanting to fight me, so it couldn't have been Pastor Ryan. But I'm just kidding. He's great. So we were playing intramural sports, and it was flag football, right? And we were playing against the RAs. They had their own team, and they would really try and beef up their team so they could just beat everybody. And so we're playing, and we're close, and we have the opportunity to score a touchdown to beat them, right? And we weren't very good, but at all the times in my intramural sports, I never won any championships, but for some reason, we always beat the best team. That was like our one time of glory. Like, hey, we were terrible, but by golly, we will beat the best team. So we're playing against the RAs, and then I come up with this plan. All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pretend I'm standing on the sideline out of bounds, but actually I'm inbounds. And I'm going to pretend, I'm out of the game and I'm taking a breather. And then when he hikes the ball, no one's going to be covering me because they're going to think I'm out of bounds. And I'm just going to start running, turn around in the end zone, and catch the ball to score the touchdown to win, right? And so some of the guys are reluctant. They're like, okay, we'll do it. Right. All right, CJ. So we get up on the sideline. I'm acting, got my drama degree. I'm acting winded. And all of a sudden, he says hike, and I start running, and no one is covering me. I step into the end zone. I turn around. It's like the movies, guys. You know how stuff goes in slow motion? Someone throws the football. I turn around. The football's coming towards me. I could win it for everyone. I put my hands up, and I missed the ball. What a letdown. If I wasn't a grown-up, I probably would have cried. But I was in the end zone. I dropped the ball. And let me just tell you, I couldn't look over at my teammates for a while. Now I look over at them, and they all just looked at me, shook their heads in disgust, and walked away off the field. I remember I sat by myself at dinner that night in the cafeteria. Didn't have any friends. I knew what it was like to be an Ohio State player, missing that winning drive, getting all that hate on Twitter later on. But it was completely not like that at all. It was intramurals. Intramurals. We're not talking, it is a game. Literally, I had no friends at dinner that night. Just ate by myself, maybe ate my sorrows, got an extra ice cream cone for the way out. And I had let that team down. I don't think they talked to me for a while. I think I apologized later on. The next day, we were all good. But for that moment, I had let them down. Today, we're going to explore an encounter Jesus had with one of his best friends, one of his disciples, Peter. And we're going to talk about how Peter felt like he let Jesus down. If you have your Bibles, it's going to be in Matthew chapter 26. And we're going to be starting in verse 69. Here we go. Peter denies Jesus. Meanwhile, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came over and said to him, "You were one of those with Jesus the Galilean." But Peter denied it in front of everyone. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. Later, out by the gate, another servant girl noticed him and said to those standing around, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again, Peter denied it, this time with an oath. "I don't even know the man," he said. A little later, some of the other bystanders came over to Peter and said, "You must be one of them. We can tell by your Galilean accent." At that time, the Galileans had such a bad accent, sometimes they wouldn't even let them pray at the end of a service because their accent was so bad. So he knew, telling by how he spoke, "You must be one of them. We can tell by your Galilean accent." Peter swore, "A curse on me if I'm lying. I don't know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. Suddenly Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." And he went away weeping bitterly. He went away weeping bitterly. So Jesus is Peter's best friend, right? There's 12 disciples, 12 followers, but every time Jesus would go somewhere, he'd take the 12 disciples, but at certain times, he would just be hanging out with his 3 best friends, Peter, James, and John. They were with him everywhere he went. That was his inner circle. Those were his boys, right? And so Peter is going through this time where Jesus is getting crucified. And Peter, out of fear of associating with Jesus, denies him 3 times. Actually, if you look at it, these 2 little girls that are asking Peter this question, because of fear, it almost makes those girls look like hostile monsters to him. They could have been the sweetest little girls. "Hey, excuse me, didn't you know Jesus?" "No, get away." "Oh," probably ran off crying. No, I'm pretty sure you hung out with Jesus." And then he curses and swears at the little girl. Actually, if you look at the translation, it actually says, "May God send me to hell if I am lying." Wow, that's big. And Peter did all of that based out of fear of associating with Jesus. Sometimes fear can make us see things differently, can it? Sometimes things happen in our life. Maybe we're offended a little extra because of fear. Maybe we act a different way to steer us or distract us from God's purpose that he's given us, his purpose on our life. And a lot of times fear can do that to us. It can steer or veer us away. Fear caused him to deny Jesus at his worst time. It's interesting, the depiction of it in Luke, it says that at the end the rooster crowed 3 times, and then Jesus locked eyes with Peter right after that. Imagine that. Imagine Jesus like, "Wow, you were my best friend. We were boys. We went everywhere together." And Peter locks eyes with Jesus and then weeps bitterly as he runs away. The interesting thing is that even when we let Jesus down, he still looks at us with love. Aren't you happy about that? The fact that as many times as we let Jesus down over and over, you may be like, "Man, I would have never let Jesus down. We were together all the time. He helped me I saw miracles happen. We walked together. He taught me all these things." And he locks eyes with Peter, but instead, I can just see it now. Instead of him looking at him like, "Wow, pathetic," he looked at him like, "Wow, I still love you." That's not even fathomable in the human idea. I mean, I would have looked at him and probably said some stuff. I would have looked at him in disgust, just shaking my head like, "Wow, you're leaving me at the roughest moment of my life. You decide to leave me now." But instead he looks at him with love. Don't ever think that because you mess up, because you deny Jesus by the way you act or by the way you talk, or you messed up in your life, that Jesus is looking at you going, "Wow, that's awful." He doesn't look at you in disgust. He looks at you with love. And so we go through, and he looks at Peter, they lock eyes, then Peter runs away. Now, the reason why this was such a letdown for Peter, not because he was Jesus' best friend, but Jesus had spoken life into Peter. I want you to turn back a couple of chapters to Matthew chapter 16, and I'm going to show you what I mean here. Matthew chapter 16. And it's actually going to be in verse 13, Matthew 16:13. And listen to what Peter's declaration about Jesus. It says, starting in verse 13, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." So Jesus is asking his disciples, who are people saying that I am actually? Then he asked, "But who do you say I am?" You ever asked your best friend what they thought about you? Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. So he asked his best, who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "You are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter." Now listen to what he declares over him. "You are Peter," which means rock, "and upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it." Aren't you excited about that this morning, that the powers of hell will not conquer the church? The church is not shut down. The church is in us. The church is us. Nothing's going to stop the church. I don't care what anyone says. And that's not me speaking, by the way. That's the Bible, so get mad with the Bible. All right? Let's continue. "All the powers of hell will not conquer it, and I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven." Then he sternly warned the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Think of this. Jesus declares this over Peter. If I was Peter, I'd be like, keep going, Jesus. What are you declaring over my life? Wow. I mean, my head would probably be out to here. Right? Just Jesus is declaring this over. I'd be looking at the other disciples. Did he say that about you? No? All right, then. Pay attention. Are you hearing what Jesus is saying about me? And Peter's just like, yes, I'm ready. Let's go. You ever had that motivational speaker where they just say something, you're like, let's go. I'm ready to do whatever, whenever, however. And that is Peter right here. And Jesus says this to him. Peter's probably thinking, I'm the man. I'm the man. Jesus said all this about me. But what Jesus meant was he's transforming his actual extreme character into something solid and reliable. Peter was very impulsive, right? He just did stuff right out of the blue. He said stuff right out of the blue. Very impulsive. And what Jesus was telling him was that, hey, you're not going to do this based on you, Peter. You're actually, you yourself, that's not going to happen with you. But with Jesus Christ, the Messiah, living within you, yes, you're going to be able to build my church. You will be the rock. So imagine Peter looking at Jesus on his way to get crucified, and he's almost going through this film in his head, just flipping through all the times that Jesus said stuff to him, all the times he encouraged him, all the miracles, and it's just going through like a really fast movie. Maybe he comes to that moment. Oh, I remember when Jesus told me that. I definitely was not a rock at that moment. Now, right after that, Peter gets a big head, like I said. And if you go back, or if you go forward a couple of verses, we look at verse 21. It says, "From then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem." This is where Peter really gets, he gets some courage. "And that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but on the third day he would be raised from the dead." But Peter took him aside. Okay, if you're looking at top 3 things not to do, one of them would be pull Jesus aside and correct him. Right? He pulls Jesus aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. "Heaven forbid, Lord," he said. "This will never happen to you." Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's." Well, that took a turn for the worst pretty fast, didn't it? So right before Jesus is telling Peter, hey, I'm going to build my church on you. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. A couple verses down, then he comes out and he says, hey, Jesus, I got to talk to you for a second. All this talk about you getting crucified, that's not the Messiah. That's not the same Messiah we're talking about. Messiah, all powerful. You're going to come in, guns a-blazing, chariots, horses. You're going to take over everything. I mean, you're going to save your people. It's going to be great. That's what I'm talking about. And Jesus brings up this point. No. Messiah means I'm going to be the suffering servant. And Peter's like, that doesn't sound very Messiah-like. And Jesus goes up to say, hey, get away from me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me right now. Now, why did he say that to him? Well, it says, you are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's. We do that a lot, don't we? Sometimes you laughed when you said he reprimanded Jesus, but we actually do that. We do that nowadays. We're praying and we're like, Jesus, you didn't do that exactly the way I wanted. Jesus, you didn't fix that like you were supposed to. Hey, Jesus, let me pull you aside. Remember all those times I was praying? You didn't do anything. I'm going to need you to fix that. We do that. We try and reprimand and correct Jesus, and Peter's doing it right here in person. And so he goes over and he's done denying Jesus. How many times have you been with maybe your younger daughters or your younger sons, if anyone has children, and they try to make you do something, but it has to be their way? Right? Anyone like that? And so some of you are like, my teenager still does that. So my daughter, she wants to color sometimes, right? Or she wants to play a game or something, but she wants to do it under her rules. And so she's like, hey, Dad, let's color this picture. All right, great. And so we get to going. I start picking out the colors. She's like, no. You're going to use this color. You're going to use this color. Don't get outside the lines, Dad. No. If you're going to do things, it has to be this way. We're playing a game. I think it's called Pop the Pig. You got to try to shove a bunch of cheeseburgers in the pig's belly till it pops. I mean, the small things that entertain kids for hours, right? But she gave me all the number ones because if you pop the belly's pig, you win. And there's 3s, there's 4s. You keep pumping him until he pops. She gave all the 3s and 4s to herself, flipped them upside down, gave me the 1s. So I'd lose. So she wants to play, she wants to participate, but she wants it to be her way. Peter's strength became his weakness when he thought about himself. When he thought man's thoughts instead of God's thoughts, his strength became his greatest weakness. Jesus is constantly working on us, isn't he? See, God put those strengths in Peter. He created Peter. He gave him those strengths and also those weaknesses as well. Sometimes we don't think about that. Sometimes we think, God created me all perfect, all everything. He gave me all the strengths and none the weaknesses. No, God knew exactly how you were going to be. He formed you while you're still in your mother's womb. He put purpose into you and gave you life. And he knew exactly how you were going to be. And still, he picked Peter as his disciple. Jesus restores us, though. That's the good news. Jesus restores us. I've been doing a little bit of woodworking lately. Nothing crazy. I don't build houses or anything like that. But when I go to the Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, I pick out some pieces of wood. And the good news is, for what I use the wood for, I don't need a perfect piece of wood. It can be a little rough around the edges because what I do then is I take it home and I sand it off so it's nice and smooth. And the other day I was thinking, man, isn't that a lot like us? Jesus, a Jewish carpenter. And he picks us out. And some of us have great strengths. Some of us are a little rough around the edges. Am I right? I don't want to have you raise your hands. But some of us are rough around the edges. But guess what? Jesus still picks us. And he still gives us purpose. And he may work on us a little bit, might hurt a little bit, may get a couple splinters along the way, but he can fix us little by little. He sands us down. The good news is that we don't have to be perfect because Jesus already is. And when Jesus died on the cross for our sin, God sees us as perfect now because he took on the sin of every single human being in the world. And so God doesn't look at us as disgust. When he looks at us, he sees his son who wiped us clean as snow. And so some of us are rough around the edges, but God is still working on us. Aren't you thankful for that? That God is still working on us on a regular basis. We don't have that pressure of waking up in the morning going, okay, I got to be perfect or God won't love me. I got to be perfect or I'm going to be looked at in disgust. No, Jesus already took away all that fear and that shame and that guilt. He bore it so we don't have to. Now we look at the restoration of Peter. Turn with me real quick to John chapter 21. We're starting in verse 1. We're going to go 1 to 14. Here is the restoration of Peter. This is the contact point that Jesus has. Later, Jesus appeared again to the disciples, verse 1, beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the son of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing. We'll come too, they all said. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. They returned to fishing. Imagine being sold out to Jesus. Imagine just, hey, we followed him. We were there, did the miracles, walked on water, calmed the storm, everything. We bought into Jesus, right? And then he gets crucified. Now what do? We gave our lives up for this. Remember when Jesus called the disciples, put down your nets, come follow me. Okay. Now what are we going to do? Imagine your friends and family. Hey, what are you doing these days? Not much. I sold my life to following Jesus, and now I don't know what I'm going to do. But they go back to their old habits, what they knew best, fishing. Sometimes we do that, don't we? When things don't work out right, we go back to our past. We go back to the hurtful relationships. We go back to the times where we thought things were comfortable. Jesus is trying to get us out of that. So the disciples go back, return to fishing, what they knew best. They were sold out to Jesus. I mean, if you see their travels, their food, a lot of that was paid by charity a lot of times. Just traveling with Jesus, oh, we're going to this person's house to eat. We're sleeping over at this person's house. I mean, they didn't have any sort of income. Maybe that's why they had to go back. Because now what? Now we have to provide for ourselves. Now we don't know what's going to happen. So they go back to what they do best, fishing. Verse 4, at dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, fellows, have you caught any fish? No, they replied. The disciples couldn't see who he was. It's interesting because at that time they were trying to catch fish. They weren't catching anything all night. So they were distracted by fishing and trying to catch it. What's going on here? And then Jesus appears and they don't recognize him. I wonder today if that's us a lot of times, where Jesus is trying to reach back out to us saying, hey, come follow me. Come on, I know you want to. I know you've been hurt in the past, but I'm here to restore you. But we're so distracted with the past, we can't even see him. We don't even recognize his voice. We don't recognize who he is. That's what the disciples were doing here. Then he said, verse 6, then he said, throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll get some. So they did. Now, at first they threw their net out on other side of the boat. Like, these were expert fishermen. Let's understand that today. These were pros. They knew how to fish. And they didn't catch one single thing. You think that was an accident? I don't think so. So Jesus comes in and says, throw your net onto the right-hand side of the boat. So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, that's John talking about himself, it's the Lord. When Simon Peter, talk about impulse, here we go. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped down for work, jumped into the water, and headed to the shore. The others stayed with the boat and pulled the loaded net to shore, for they were only about 100 yards from shore. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire, and some bread. Think about this. They're hauling in all these fish. They couldn't even hold them all into the net. And someone's like, oh, it's Jesus. Imagine Peter's pulling the fish. Yeah, come on, guys, we can do it. What'd you say? Jumps out of the boat, starts swimming to shore. The rest of the guys are thinking, all right, Peter, we'll take care of it. Don't you worry. We'll bring all the fish to shore. You just go on ahead. And talk about impulse, and that's why I say this, because imagine he's swimming towards the shore, and right before he gets there, there's a flashback. He has seen Jesus previously once before, but this time, he knows something's up. He can feel it. And there's a flashback to that moment where he denies Jesus. In other books of the Bible, it says that he was around a fire at the time when he denied Jesus. And then it says here that Jesus, he had breakfast waiting for them, fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. Just think about that for a second. He walks up to the shore, soaking wet. He swam a lot. Yes, I'm so excited for Jesus. And then he sees the fire, and he remembers what he did. He has a flashback again. You know, every time I get close to a fire now, I feel like I remember what I did to Jesus. I denied Jesus. I swore to that little girl. I lied. I took an oath. All this stuff, everything to make me not represent Jesus at that time, I did so people wouldn't think he was my friend. And he has a flashback right there to the charcoal burning and the fire going, and he remembers. Now come and have some breakfast, verse 12. Jesus said, none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. This was the third time Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he had been raised from the dead. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, oh, I can see it now. They're done eating. Jesus looks over at Peter. Oh, boy. You ever got home past curfew before? And you kind of slowly unlock the door, try to squeak your way in the house. You got that noisy house door, never got fixed. You think you're in the clear, in the dark. You walk over, and all of a sudden, the light turns on. Where were you? Yikes. Imagine that's how Peter feels at that moment. His tail goes between his legs, and he's just like, here we go. Here's time. This is probably where Jesus says, I'm so disappointed in you. You are such an awful person. How dare you do that to me when I needed you the most? But instead, he looks at Peter. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Verse 15. Yes, Lord, Peter replied. You know I love you. Then feed my lambs, Jesus told him. Jesus repeated the question. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter said. You know that I love you. Take care of my sheep, Jesus said. He asked him one more time. Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my sheep. Jesus never changes through the restoration process. Some of us can't see Jesus because we're so focused on the failure. Maybe that past mistake we made. Maybe that past relationship we were in that was just awful. Maybe that time where we denied Jesus simply by our actions. And we think about that over and over and over. And I'm here to tell you today, give your guilt to Jesus. Give your sorrow to him. Your mistakes do not define you. You haven't served him in 15 years? Start back up today. You've never made a decision to follow Jesus before in your life? Start it today. Jesus does not change during this restoration process. In restoring, he doesn't ask Peter if he's sorry. He doesn't ask Peter how he's feeling. He simply says, let me have your heart, and the rest will follow. How much do you love me, Peter? Because out of the mouth, the heart speaks. Repentance is a change of heart. It's a change of thinking. And we have to be asking today, are we ready to think what God has for us, not what man has for us? Are we thinking God thoughts or man thoughts? Are we a stumbling block, or are we going after what Jesus has for us? Jesus lets Peter know, hey, what happened in the past is the past. I want you to set your eyes on what's ahead. But he couldn't stop remembering that rooster crowing. He couldn't stop remembering that fire that happened. I brought a little illustration to the stage this morning. Anyone know what this is? Some of you know, some of you don't. This is called a monkey drum. And if any of you have seen Karate Kid 2, during the movie, there's a part where Mr. Miyagi is teaching Daniel about this drum. And Daniel's like, what is this? Just a silly drum. And Mr. Miyagi says, oh, my father taught me this. So he takes him and he shows him. He always has a part to show him in everything he does, to take it back, something to remember in a skill. And so he shows him this, and he takes him up to this boat. And there's something that you pull, and this swinging blade comes at him, and you have to dodge it. And so he dodges it, and he's like, I don't understand. He's like, yeah, it's the drum. When it goes back, that's when you swing and you dodge the hit. And this was on the other day, and for some reason I can't flip the channel when it's on. I just can't. And I'm going through and I see it, and right at the moment he says, Mr. Miyagi, I have a question. Is there a counter punch? I know you're trying to dodge, but is there a counter punch to this? Is there a time where we're done dodging and it's time to attack? It's time to move forward? Mr. Miyagi says, ask the drum. Ask the drum. Now, at the end of the movie, I'm going to spoil it, so it's a pretty old movie. If you haven't seen it, sorry. But at the end of the movie, Daniel's fighting this guy for honor, and it's not a tournament. This is life or death. And he's fighting the guy, and he's beat up, and he's battered, and he's sitting there bleeding and wondering what he's going to do next, how he's going to fend this guy off. Mr. Miyagi pulls out the drum, and he starts going. And then all of a sudden, everyone around pulls out their hand drum, because apparently at that time, everyone kept their hand drum with them in their robes. So he pulls out the hand drum, and everyone starts going. And at that moment, Daniel remembers, hey, there's a counterpunch. And so he uses it to defeat the guy he's fighting. And I wonder today how some of us, maybe we're too busy focusing on the rooster and remembering that night that Jesus was denied. But you guys know, you don't have to be a farmer for this, but do you guys know when the rooster crows? When does the rooster crow? In the morning. Well, what does that mean when the rooster crows in the morning? It's the start of a new day. It's the start of a new day. And so I'm here to ask you guys today, maybe someone today needs restoring. Maybe you've been so focused on the past, the dodging, trying to get away from everything that you have not focused on the counterpunch, how to move forward. The rooster means a new day. It's a new day to serve God. His mercies are new every morning. Your mistakes do not define you. Your actions do not define you. Let Jesus restore you today. And as the band starts to make their way up on the stage this morning, if I could have everyone just bow your heads, close your eyes. I want to give a simple invitation this morning. Maybe someone needs restoration today. Maybe someone sitting here or someone online needs to be restored today. Maybe you've failed. You don't know how you're ever going to get back to Jesus. The crow just keeps going over and over and over and over and over. Things keep coming back and they remind you and they remind you. Well, how about today is the day where you focus on the counterpunch and you say, hey, you know what? That past is my past. I'm ready to be restored. I'm ready for that relationship with Jesus to be restored today. I'm tired of that guilt. I'm tired of that shame. Maybe you've been on this long path, kind of in and out of following Jesus. Maybe today's the day you say, you know what? I'm going to make a decision to go back to following Jesus. I'm going to make a decision to have him restore me today. My mistake I made isn't me. That's not who I am. People don't call me that. That is not who you are. You are a child of God. So maybe today you're sitting in here and you say, you know what? Pastor CJ, I need you to pray for me because I need restored. No one looking around, every head bowed, every eye closed. And you're saying this morning, you know what? I'm praying this morning for restoration. If you just lift your hand up real quick and put it back down. Maybe you're online joining us, and it would be great if you'd send a message online to Pastor Ryan saying, I need prayer this morning. I need to be restored this morning. Today's the day of restoration. Instead of looking at the rooster as a reminder of the things I've done, the past, the guilt, the shame, let the rooster remind you that it's a new day, it's a new morning, it's time for that counterattack. It's time to defeat what the enemy's trying to keep you down. He will distract you to try to keep you from God's purpose from your life. Maybe today's the day of restoration. As we sing this last song, I'll be up here at the front. Pastor Ryan will as well, some others. If you need prayer, go and find someone today. Say, I need to be restored today. I need Jesus to restore me today. I cannot do it on my own. Maybe you're online. Find someone online to talk to. We're here. Send us a message. Send us a prayer. You need to be restored today. God, we thank you so much that you sent your son to restore us. That as many times as Peter messed up day in and day out and at one point tried to be a stumbling block for Jesus, but that you restored him. You took him away from that, making the rest of his life about denying you, to what you had for him for the future. And essentially, what he failed to embrace at the beginning, he embraced to end his life at the cross, being crucified. God, we thank you so much for your restoration. For all those here that raise their hands, for those online who need restoration, I pray that you'd give them that today. Restore them. Restore our relationship with you. If we've been dwindling in the past and we haven't been focused on you, I pray that you would help someone make a decision. Maybe someone's never made a decision in their whole life to follow you, and today is the day they're saying, today I make a decision to follow Jesus, to be fully restored, to become a child of God. Lord, we thank you so much that you are not a God of disappointment, but that you are a God of love. And when you look at us, you see your son. We thank you for that in Jesus' name. Amen.